Characters. They're the driving force of any story or game. Whether it's a little blue bird that splits into 3 birds when you toss it in Angry Birds, or it's a deeply bitter war hero who the world has turned its back on in StarCraft II. Characters are who we see the game through. They are our portal into the story of the game world. The better we understand who a character is, the more engaged we are with the underlying story. It's important to understand how to use characters to propel your game and connect to the player. Take the game of chess. It's a classic that dates back quite a long time ago. It has game pieces that each have a different movement pattern, and you have to learn how each game piece can be used to trap your opponent into submission. But are they characters? Well, if you see chess as a story and define it that way, then yeah, you have to see each game piece as its own character, with its own very set of traits and reasons for being. We saw a little of this pan out in 1988 with the great computer version called Battle Chess. Here we introduced the notion of a game piece being a character. In Battle Chess, the game pieces come to life and battle each other whenever one piece takes another in an otherwise normal game of chess. So, for example, when a pawn takes a bishop, he taps on the floor and opens up a hole under the bishop, who then just falls right through the game board. This added a novelty to chess that turned a lot of people on to playing the game on the computer. It brought a level of character and amusement to an intense game. So I challenge you, and especially those of you who want to design non-story games like Angry Birds, to think of all your game pieces as characters that have personality, emotion, and life. Let's talk about the primary character, the protagonist, which we know is essentially the hero of a story that drives the plot forward. It's through the hero's perspective that you relate to the circumstances of the story, so you should ideally understand him or her the most. Furthermore, in a game, the hero is typically the character you also control. In Angry Birds, you're in control of the birds as you flick them across the screen at the pigs. In StarCraft II, it's a little more complicated, but essentially, you're in control of the protagonist's, Jim Raynor's, forces, and you see the story unfold from their perspective. Wings of Liberty makes sure to give you enough of Jim's backstory and current circumstances to keep the plot interesting and relevant. When we see Jim get betrayed, we feel for him. We want to help him seek revenge through the gameplay, investing us into the game deeper because we understand his character's goal. The story shows us that Jim has a clear, actionable goal in Act 1, where we meet him in a bar. His goal at that point is simply to overthrow the Emperor. But to give Jim more depth, we need to have a character goal, a deeper need or want that drives his persona. Jim's wider character goal, in my opinion, is to redeem himself and reclaim his good name as a hero from the previous StarCraft games. So when you create your own characters, you should always arm them with goals, both immediate and the wider character goals. Immediate goals are challenges and hurdles that they must overcome during the action of the gameplay, during the game's story.
So I'm just a cog in your machine.
If it gets you what you want, do you care?
Guess I don't.
Character goals are those where the character is actively or even subconsciously reaching for a longer-term objective, a want that they have, like personal redemption or finding a true love.
Your Emperor's the one should be brought to justice. All I ever wanted was for folks to live free.
All of their actions are then guided by this longer-term character goal and help define who the character is. And their immediate goals and actions should really support that. Jim Raynor's overarching character goal was to gain power and just simply become the next Terran Emperor. The entire tone of Wings of Liberty would change. It would change the entire story and shift the gameplay. It would be an entirely different game. But as it stands now in Wings of Liberty, we can say Jim's character goal was to overcome his bitterness, to show the Terran world the hypocrisy of their current emperor, and fulfill his own sense of worth. His actions, his immediate goals all tend to conform to that character truth of getting that back for himself, redeeming himself for what's happened in the past. The same can be said of the antagonist character. They too must have immediate goals, usually in direct opposition to the hero, actively so, because they have something to gain from foiling the hero.
Jim Raynor represents a clear and present threat to this dominion. He is an unscrupulous, lawless revolutionary bent on spreading fear and dissension across the sector.
Emperor Mengsk in Wings of Liberty has absolutely everything to gain from hunting down Jim and silencing him forever. Mengsk's character goal as the villain is to retain and grow his own power over the Terran Dominion. Though both these character goals for Jim and the Emperor are not explicitly spelled out in the game, they do underline the game's story and fuel the motivations for their actions throughout the game. The key here is that the hero and the villain have an existing and opposing character goals, bringing back to light what we've talked about before, creating an emotional connection between the protagonist and antagonist, and building your story to exploit that. So the more story-driven your game is, the more you want to think about your characters beyond the scope of the immediate game, to create lives for them that reach beyond the limits and help define their motivations as living beings. With simple arcade games like Angry Birds, it's much simpler to state these character goals since there's only a very simple cartoonish narrative to the game. But it's still important to know what these goals are. The birds want their eggs back at any cost. It's so important. The pigs want to keep their eggs. They're so greedy. What creates a deeper character for these game pieces is also in their design and their individual game capabilities. We will see how these characters can be broken down and described in character descriptions in the next lecture. But it's important to keep all this in mind. Define your character as deeply as possible and give them wants and needs that go beyond the scope of your immediate game to help motivate their actions and their personas in the game.